Welcome and thank you for joining us. This is The Bald and the Beard, recording one of our Myth or Reality series. And in case you don't have visuals and can't tell, I'm Andrew the Beard, and this is...
I'm your favorite bald BPO expert, Tom Luther.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. So today's topic of conversation is outsourcing is inherently risky because I will lose control. Oof. And then at the end, as we always do, we'll give it a score. 0 is that's got absolutely no grounds in reality. Through to 10, yes, we completely agree. And we'll see how we end up. You'll score it, I'll score it. And we'll see how we do. So to kick this off, Tom, I think the initial concern is if I'm going to outsource, obviously the choice of partner is critical. What happens, or how do I avoid preferably picking the wrong one? What are your thoughts there?
You know, everybody, I think, has a friend that's outsourced in some way, shape, or form. Not necessarily even call center, but outsourced any function in their life, and it hasn't gone the way they wanted it to.
Mm-hmm.
And when you talk to them, often it's, well, how many people did you talk to? Did you talk to any advisors? Did you talk to the experts? Partnership is key. There's no doubt that making the wrong choice of a contact center outsourcer can set your organization back. The average lifespan of an outsourcer can be several years. It can be several months. It can be 10 years. I mean, I've seen relationships in all ways, shapes, or forms. But at the end of the day, what I've seen is that you need actual experiences, curated references, do your homework, utilize an agnostic advisor or someone in that realm to help you understand the possibilities. We've talked about it in past videos. Don't fly alone, right? And we see a lot of organizations doing that today, and it absolutely can set your organization back in many ways.
So if I can add to that, people are really capable of making decisions. I think the inherent problem is the data that they're using to make that decision when they're picking one of these partners is biased, right? It comes from a sales and marketing department of that outsourcer. And yeah, I think that you use the term curated references. They pick those really carefully. And we all know every company has 3 references. However they've come by those references, even the terrible ones have 3 good references. So You have to be a little careful. And I think you insinuated that one of the benefits of an organization like the one we happen to work for, Outsource Consultants, is that we get to see the after effects. And when that piece of business, that program's placed, how did it actually go? And what is reality? And then that gets filtered back into, you don't make the short list if you don't perform after the fact. So that's a great strategy for not starting out with the wrong partner. Let's dig into that control element because, well, you work with me, you know, I have a strong control reflex. So if you were somebody like me who was uncomfortable, maybe a first-time outsourcer, right? Uncomfortable with the idea that this isn't going to be in the building that I'm in. I'm not going to be able to walk down the hall and look at these people. They're not my employees anymore. What would you say to that person that was like nervous about losing control there?
Yeah, I'll give you a hot take. When I first started in the BPO world in the early 2000s, the BPO absolutely wanted to be on an island by themselves, understand the job description, and go find talent without the client being heavily involved. That is actually flipped on its head. A lot of the BPOs today want stickiness, they want partnership, they want collaboration.
Sure.
Not so much conflict of interest and co-employment during the interview process, but develop recruiting questions together, developing the process together, asking some questions that they ask in-house, talking with them when they're on the fence about someone. That type of open dialogue builds trust. And don't wait to see, someone that's on the fence come in the door, get trained, maybe you felt was the wrong fit, but you put them through anyways. That's risky. That leads to lack of trust, right? But if you involve your account manager on the brand side throughout the recruiting process, that builds trust. And again, that's a much different take than we were in about 10 years ago. And I think the BPOs that lean in to that type of involvement get off to a great start from a trust perspective.
So picking a partner based on actual performance, as well as all of those other soft, comfortable metrics that you're exposed to during a sales process, being involved in who they're hiring to work on your program. And of course, we're making the assumption here that this is a dedicated team, right? Which is most of what we see and most of what we're talking about in this series. So you've got these elements of right partner, right people recruited. It's interesting then, you're not just outsourcing the work, you're outsourcing the management of those people. So I've got some thoughts on this in terms of that is the key to actually having control. And by that, I mean, if you're doing it in-house and you're dealing with training and retention and replacement when the retention doesn't work, you don't have time to look at the strategic bigger picture. So you only have control of what you can get through. Time is your limitation. Once you've outsourced a piece of that, you're actually able to work in partnership with your outsourcer and have more control. So you've run centers. How's that transpire? It sounds like a great story. How's that transpire in real life?
Yeah, I think that you definitely have to lean on your partner for a little more trust. Again, you're outsourcing work to them, but I talk often about this concept of how do you go from BPO vendor to BPO partner? The whole risk piece is, and the losing of control piece is absolutely an initial feeling that you have. But when you're working and selecting the right BPO partner that understands your KPIs, your processes, your short and long-term goals, and they are proactively working with you on weekly reviews, monthly reviews, making you feel more and more confident and trustworthy that they have control of what's happening, you feel more at ease. So it's not a loss of control. It's a loss of worry. It's a loss of heartburn. You actually are seeing a partner that you've selected take proactive measures to keep you very abreast of performance, of process, of the good, the bad. And over time, that leads to a great deal of trust from what I've seen. Now, conversely, if you have someone that's a poor communicator and they're a poor performer and they're not asking for feedback and they're not being transparent with you, then sure, it's gonna give you those feelings that you're losing control and you made the wrong decision. But it really comes down to finding a proactive partner that communicates and demonstrates that they want to be a partner and not just a traditional outsourced vendor.
So it's interesting, right? If you look at, say this is still in-house, right? Somebody's considering outsourcing for the first time, they run it in-house. How much of the time of your supervisors and leadership is spent in dealing with the day-to-day repetitive stuff? And if they didn't have to do that, what could they do? They could take analytic feedback. They could take feedback from the BPO, giving them, we keep seeing the same thing happening. Maybe there's a process issue, and actually do something with that. So the opportunity in that partnership you're describing for improvements overall that improve CX within the same budget, or maybe even start to save money, you can get to those things that make a difference. Where I think most people listening to this that have run a center in a brand, there just isn't the resources to do that. Like, you want to, you have all the best intentions in the world, and then you walk into a Monday morning and it's Friday afternoon by the time you've blinked, and you've not got to any of those things. So I think just having the understanding that the outsourcing helps you have more visibility to the bigger picture stuff and then potentially make improvements.
Yeah, I guess one more thought on that is I've ran centers both for N brands as well as BPOs, and you run them very differently. To your point, the supervisor at an N brand BPO, they are often doing a lot of things outside of their job. They're supposed to be monitoring performance, coaching performance, making sure that workforce management and quality is up to snuff, and they're watching the operation. They're not. right? They're stuck doing a lot of administrative tasks. They're stuck in a product meeting. Then they go to marketing meeting. Then they maybe have a meeting with the IT team. And all the meanwhile, their team is left on the floor without really anybody really driving performance. So there becomes an inefficiency perspective. When you outsource, you have typically a dedicated supervisor on a program that's monitoring every nook and cranny of performance. So to your point, you're driving efficiency, you're ultimately driving performance, um, and ultimately some cost reduction typically, because you'll see better handle times, you'll see better first contact resolution, which leads to better customer retention, less customer churn, more revenue for the business. So there's also an opportunity for the BPOs to show their value just because their eyes are on what matters day to day.
There's that element too that you're hiring an expert in this one bit. If you look at it from the brand perspective, much as you and I would like to think that the contact center is the most important thing in a business, it's typically not. Typically regarded as a cost center and an irritation, I've heard you say this, by most financial leaders. Whereas it's the BPO's business. They're really good at it. They do a lot of it, and they're singularly focused. So that collaboration between the two brings elements that you couldn't get if it was isolated to either side. There's one more subject I think we'd be remiss if we didn't cover. So control, this is 2024, so control of data. If I'm going to partner this closely with this BPO and I'm a brand outsourcing for the first time, got concerns about somebody else having access to my data. So you and I know that while that's a valid concern, there are many ways to mitigate it. Would you care to take us through some of those?
Yeah, it's amazing. Some of the conversations that I've had over the years, your COO, your CFO, your CRO, even the CEO, everybody's ready to outsource. Everybody's excited, but then there's your infosec team that has and rightfully so, their concerns, right? Again, there's nothing more important these days than protecting the sensitive customer data, especially in today's ever scary cyber world. So it's important that, again, not necessarily going alone, back to that theme, leveraging an expert like Outsource Consultants to make sure you're introduced to the right potential partners that have the right cyber strategy, the right data protection strategy, and the right processes in place to make sure that it is a seamless handoff. Because at the end of the day, the customer should never know that it's outsourced or not, right? They should never have that fear in the back of their head, regardless whether they're talking to an English-speaking individual or someone that's clearly based overseas. They should never have any doubt that their sensitive customer data is in great hands. And again, organizations sometimes tend to fly alone on this stuff, don't do their diligence. Why not look at all of the potential partners that are out there and make sure the process is in place more than meet your internal expectations to give you that true feeling of control here, in the inverse of that, making sure that you feel in control of the data.
And depending on what industry you're in, you're going to have certain requirements. Perhaps you could even partner with a BPO that has more stringent proof, right? Independently verified proof that they're meeting processes above and beyond what your organization has. And then effectively, then it's a lowering of risk than doing it in-house.
I like to tell people that if you think about the world of BPO, people always say, we've never outsourced this call type, or this industry's never outsourced. I've yet to come across one of those. You name the industry, you name the contact type, I've typically seen it outsourced, whether it's onshore, nearshore, offshore. So you can kind of throw that out. And where I'm going with that is, yes, the processes are often even more buttoned up. The technology is in place because they've had to talk to a financial client, a healthcare client. So again, they've got pretty strong defense mechanisms in place already because they have to be prepared for industries of all shapes and sizes and needs.
So just to wrap up, that's an interesting point, that just because you don't think that industry's outsourced, it just means they did it right.
Exactly right.
They have outsourced, you just didn't notice because it felt like an in-brand experience. That's
right.
That's kind of what everybody strives for. All right. You ready for scoring?
I'm ready.
So The scoring scale is 0, complete and utter garbage, 0 risk involved, all the way to 10, this is the riskiest thing in the world. Now, I think we have to be careful here because there are risks involved, and it depends on the strategy that you take. So let's say that you're doing this with somebody like Outsource Consultants, and you've got an agnostic advisor involved in the mix. How risky do we think it is? 0's no risk, which is, everything has risk, all the way to 10, which is don't do it. It's terrible. I feel that it's somewhere in the 1 to 2 range. What do you feel?
Yeah, I would agree. It's a 1 between 1 and 2, like you shared. There's very low risk when you choose to fly with someone. And you look at the results of customers that have worked with someone that has a worldly view and has all the partners like we do to choose from, and then ultimately make sure that you have someone supporting that relationship as time goes on that's not part of the BPO or the customer. That extra level of stickiness even makes it less and less risky on top of everything we've discussed today. So for me, it's a 1.
Okay. And bear in mind that I personally would rate keeping it in-house from a risk perspective, looking at the same criteria, as a 3. So in the view, yes, there's risk, but there's risk involved in opening your front door and leaving your house in the morning. So we can't eliminate risk. This done right is a lower risk proposition than keeping it in-house. Yes, you could get up into much higher scores if you didn't do it diligently. But that's a great way of looking at it. And to your comment there about having an ongoing presence with your agnostic advisor through the relationship, in recent conversations, I suggested to somebody who happened to work at a BPO that of the client miscommunications, what percentage of those were based on an actual problem and what were based just on two people saying the same thing but not hearing each other. And it was an 80-20 rule. So having somebody in the middle who's not got a bias to either side that just wants things to work, and interpreting that 80% of those friction points into something clear so that they can be seen for what they are, which was a non-problem, and then focusing the effort down on the 20% that might need some work, absolutely a way to keep us down at that 1 and not have it elevate through the relationship. Awesome. Well, this is the point where we normally make some snarky comments, but I'm feeling in a good mood today, so I'm going to be kind. Don't have any snarky ball comments to make for you today.
Well, my head's looking really shiny today. I've got a little bit of a tan on, so feeling all right.
Oh yeah. Well, okay, I take it back. So when you were getting the sun this weekend, did you notice the people sat opposite you at the sports field all had sunglasses on, not because of the sun but the reflection?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right, Tom. Pleasure as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you.